Last night, President Ramaphosa delivering his plan of action on the implementation of the State Capture Commission recommendations. He announced that the Investigating Directorate of the NPA will now become a permanent corruption-busting feature within the entity. Now, at the same weekend, or should I say in the same weekend, the President receiving backlash from former President Jacob Zuma, among other presidents, and Zuma in particular, accusing the President of treason and not being focused on his job following the Phala-Phala saga. To speak to us more on these issues facing the President now, we're joined by the Head of the Presidency in the ANC, Sibongile Besani, is here for us this morning. Thank you very much for making it to studio, sir. Let's begin with the President's address last night. Tough talk from the President as far as dealing decisively with corruption. Do you think South Africans, the morning after, are convinced by what the President said last night?
Well, I think the South Africans are encouraged once again that President Cyril Ramaphosa has continued not to mince his word on the agenda to fight corruption. He has not flinched on the program to ensure that what the ANC conference resolved on to fight against corruption has got to be continued. So President Ramaphosa has not been sleeping on the job of ensuring that corruption is fought, and that is why when the Commission of Inquiry, as per the conference resolution, completed its investigations or its findings, its inquiry, and he was given the deadline to report, and he has done so. So that is commitment to what the President and his collective has actually made, and that demonstrates commitment.
Some people watching that address last night, there was a point where the President said, I'm now dealing with members of the executive who are implicated in state capture, and this is now the action that I'm going to take. Instead, the President doesn't make an announcement about who's going to be fired, for what reason. Instead, he, as the proverbial word says, kicking the can down the road. Why did the President miss the opportunity to make an announcement as to what he is going to do with members of the executive who were implicated in state capture? Because he's already missed that opportunity, by the way. Last night was yet another one.
No, I don't think the President missed the opportunity. What President reported, remember the Commission required that the President should demonstrate what is it that is going to happen. And what the President stipulated yesterday was to categorize the findings of the State Commission and to say this is what the State Commission said we should do. And based on the kind of actions that were required, for instance, there are about 200 or so cases that will go to that were criminally linked. Others have been referred to various state institutions to take disciplinary action and so on. The President explained elaborately on the kind of findings of the Commission and the kind of actions recommended by the Commission. And I think if you were to take that into account, you'll realize that the President has demonstrated that all actions that needs to be taken by whoever has been, if you are criminally charged and so on, that process has been referred to as per the inquiry. And even on constitutional matters, the President made indications to what processes are going to be followed.
So South Africans should wait up until when to hear exactly what the President is going to do with members of his executive who were found on the wrong side of the law?
No. Remember, one of the things that you must remember, Paul, is that we are a country of rules. We are the country of the Constitution. Here in the media platforms, we continuously advocate for for the country to uphold its constitution. So where findings have been found and they require law enforcement, the president has indicated that all those have been referred to relevant institutions. It is for those institutions to actually ensure that they take action. In other words, that's why the president in his address yesterday made it clear that various institutions were given these reports, because if you look at the category of sort of malfeasance involved or findings that were there, they required that various institutions should actually act. So the president cannot just act because he's the president. He acts in terms of the institutions that have been put in place. So that should demonstrate that it is action that is in progress.
Let's deal with matters that affect the president directly, because this appears to have been a source of major concern, especially for former President Mbeki, for example, who expressed concern at what would happen if a prima facie case were established when it comes to the Phala-Phala farm matter. And so the question is the president alive to that reality as to, with these multiple investigations that are ongoing right now, should any one of them say there is a prima facie case against the president, is he ready to relinquish all of his leadership roles?
I think just a minute or a second ago, we're talking about how President Ramaphosa is committed against corruption, how he has gone at length to explain his commitment and to act on corruption. Now, with regards to a matter that affects him, he has demonstrated on more than one occasion that he will cooperate with any state institution, with any law enforcement. So that question of whether the president is alive or not, if there's any person who's vigilant on the fight against corruption, is President Cyril Ramaphosa. In fact, one of the things that we must explain, I have had the opportunity to listen to part of what President Mbeki was talking about. I think he was not actually posing the question to the president. He was posing the question because he was discussing in a strategic dialogue, the SDG platform, where he creates various scenarios. He was posing the question to those who are involved in planning, in strategy, whether it's comrades or various platforms, to say these are things that the country or revolutionaries and activists of the ANC should think about. So it was not a question really that attacks the president. It was saying that if we were to find ourselves in a certain situation, are we ready? What we must think out of the box. He was challenging the platform there, and was surprised that that is being punted as the attack on the president.
Well, what do you say to critics who say President Ramaphosa lacks credibility when it comes to dealing decisively with corruption, given the millions that were stashed in his house?
Number one, if there's anything that South African must know, this is one presidency that is not averse to criticism, especially criticism that is constructive. Now, that does not mean we agree with every criticism that is bombarded towards the president. For an example, if people say President Ramaphosa is indecisive, yesterday nobody challenged the fact that under President Cyril Ramaphosa, he asserted that when the Hawks, the NPA, were actually there, being in the process of them being revamped, close to about 4,500 convictions were made. That cannot mean indecisiveness against corruption.
Mr. Besani, the question has to do with the credibility of the president when addressing matters of corruption. It is not it's not an assumption to say that the president had dollars sitting in his house. Why were these stashed in his house? Why is SARS, for example, not saying anything around that? All of these matters are awaiting the answers. And he has been to Parliament on several occasions. He has not said anything that South Africans could walk away and say the President indeed has responded sufficiently here.
Look, it is not assumption too that 4,500 convictions were made. On the issue that relates to Phala-Phala, the President has indicated many a times that especially the first time he indicated was at the Provincial Conference of Limpopo as to how the funds that came to his farm, because he's a farmer, you know, he indicated that he disclosed as to how he makes business and so on. So this issue that the President is hiding something is neither here nor there. But what is important, the President went further to indicate that there are serious allegations made, you know, against him. And in order for him not to be perceived as somebody who is trying to be preemptive or tamper with the investigation, he has taken a very principled stance that let us allow the investigations to continue. And in that context, we believe that all these independent findings will have their time to say these are the findings that we have on the President. Another demonstration that he has submitted himself to the laws that be in the country.
Well, that very response around Palapala is what has caused former President Zuma to say the following, and I quote, "Your president has committed treason. No president should conduct private business while in office." Is former President Zuma wrong?
Well, I think there are limitations with the statements of President Zuma. And to some extent, one is compelled. We respect his criticism like any other person, but this is the point. When President Ramaphosa became the deputy president, he disclosed, you know, his business interests and how those business interests would actually be modeled. At that point, he was even serving under President Zuma. There was never this issue that President Zuma raised. We find it quite disingenuous. But most importantly, it is not President Cyril Ramaphosa who is before the courts of law on issues of corruption. It is not President Cyril Ramaphosa who has been found to have defied the Constitutional Court. I think the statements of President Zuma are a bit disingenuous, and they flow from the fact that he may be aggrieved about, which is allowed, he may be aggrieved about a number of issues that relates to him. But to really say the President has committed treason, a President who's not even in the courts of law, is quite disingenuous.
On the July unrest matter, former President Zuma sent his condolences this weekend to the families of those who lost loved ones. And if South Africans have forgotten, over 300 lives were lost during that period. And this is what former President Zuma also says in the same breath, that those lives, those people who died, they died over one judicial mistake, quote unquote. They died over one judicial mistake. How should South Africans interpret that from a former head of state, a former leader of the ANC?
Well, if you remember, the President made a task team to inquire about the incidents of July last year, and various findings were made there. So I don't remember coming across something that suggests that there was a judicial mistake. So flowing from the investigations that were conducted, nothing suggested, you know, that there was a judicial mistake. But now, if President Zuma is aggrieved about how the courts took the decision and so on, you can't fight him to feel aggrieved and so on, and he knows the processes on how to deal with that. What is of critical importance is that when people have lost lives, we need to take that seriously. We don't have to trivialize it, you know. And I think he has done the good thing by paying condolences to those who have lost lives, to the families and so on. So, but it is important to realize that the basis of him being aggrieved about a judicial mistake, it cannot be for President Ramaphosa to pronounce on that. It has to be for him, President Zuma, to take the matter through the proper channels.
You believe that former President Zuma is trivializing the lives that were lost during that period?
Yeah, if, for instance, you say, no, people have lost lives because of a judicial mistake, and there isn't evidence to suggest that there's such, or you have not conducted an investigation in that regard, I think you are trivializing the matter. I mean, lives have been lost, the economy has been impacted upon during that July issue. It's a serious matter that if you are to make that statement, you really have to really give a full account on what do you mean.
Mr. Besani,
what evidence do you have on that?
Let's wrap up our conversations, because the allegations that are made by former President Zuma, they're quite a lot. And clearly, from your response, you're saying that the former president is not to be taken seriously, because if there's one person who is before the courts right now on corruption matters, it is him. But that does not suggest that the president who's in office now is not complicit to this behavior. For example, the president welcomed the decision to allow former President Jacob Zuma to be let out on medical parole. He actually welcomed that through a statement. This is the same former president that you are now saying he should not be taken seriously, because if there's one person who is before the courts on corruption matters, it is him. President Ramaphosa can't speak from two sides of the mouth. No, he must take responsibility for allowing the laws of this country to be made a joke. He is complicit, is he not?
One, I never said we shouldn't take President Zuma for granted. I actually challenged his view that President Ramaphosa is corrupt. And I said it's not President Ramaphosa who is in the courts of law. That does not mean I'm saying just dismiss President Zuma and so on. I'm just saying that statement for me lacks some, it's a bit disingenuous. That's the point I'm making. Whether you take him serious, I think President Zuma is a former president of the ANC. We all take our former president, what they say, quite seriously. So, number two, when President Zuma was taken into custody or in prison, it was not an easy. It's not an easy thing for the ANC, and that is why when he gets out of it, President even went further to say it is a relief for everybody. So remember the approach. It is not President Ramaphosa who took President Zuma to court, and I think that's something that must be stated.
It's President Ramaphosa's government who allowed him to leave.
We have the Constitution in the country, and there are state institutions that act on the basis of their independence. Nobody is above the law. Now, this notion that President Ramaphosa took President Zuma to court and so on, and that is complicit, I think it's a misfiring, quite frankly, Toli. The point here is that even if President Zuma has a right to criticize and so on, and we respect his right, we have a right, to also disagree with him. And it doesn't mean, we take his views for granted. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Sibongile Besani, thank you very much for your time. We'll allow for a longer discussion next time.
Okay.
Thanks indeed for your time. That's the Head of the Presidency in the African National Congress. Still to come, your markets update.